Hello everyone, today we are going to talk about the American author Kurt Vonnegut. In this video, you will have a good idea about this great writer. You will get to know all the necessary details. So, let's get started. Kurt Vonnegut. He was born in 1922, and he passed away in 2007. As a counterculture hero of the turbulent 1960s, and a best-selling author among readers of popular fiction in the 4 decades afterward, Kurt Vonnegut was at once more traditional and more complicated than his enthusiasts might believe. To a generation of young people who felt their country had forsaken them, he offered examples of common decency and cultural idealism as basic as a grade school civics lesson. For a broader readership who felt conventional fiction was inadequate to express the way their lives had been disrupted by the era's radical social changes, he wrote novels structured in more pertinently contemporary terms, bereft of such unifying devices as conclusive characterization and chronologically organized plots. His most famous novel, Slaughterhouse-Five, 1969, takes as its organizing incident the Allied firebombing of the German city of Dresden late in World War II, as witnessed by the American prisoner of war, Billy Pilgrim. Yet despite its origins in the 1940s, the manner of its telling is much more akin to the writing of Americans of the 1960s who were coming to terms with the Vietnam War. Like the turmoil in Southeast Asia, Slaughterhouse-Five abjured the certainties of an authoritative beginning, middle, and end. Both presented a mesmerizing sense of confused, apparently directionless present, with no sense of completion or conclusion. Together, this World War II novel and the later war during which it was written speak for the unsettling nature of the American 1960s. The assassination of presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy figures in the book's concluding chapter. Yet this unconventional structure is paired with the language of American vernacular, much in the manner of Vonnegut's hero, Mark Twain. Where more elevated speech would obscure his point, this author speaks plainly and simply, drawing his words, phrases, and inflections from the American middle class and its common experiences of life. Vonnegut was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, to a family prominent in business and the arts. During the Great Depression of the 1930s, the sensitive, well-read teenager saw his mother's inherited wealth dissipate, his father's career as an architect crumble for lack of work, and his extended family scatter around the country in search of new careers. Service as a World War II infantryman taught him not only how politics reshapes the world, but also how science — Vonnegut had been studying biochemistry in college before enlistment — could be used to create effects as destructive to humankind as the Dresden firestorm, which Vonnegut himself endured as a prisoner of war. Working as a publicist for the General Electric Corporation after the war, the author learned firsthand about the strategies for managing the lifestyles of millions. In short, before writing his first story in 1950, Kurt Vonnegut had shared many formative experiences of his generation. Reworking those experiences would yield fictions and a public stance that helped his fellow Americans adjust to a reinvented post-war world. Vonnegut's advice, like Mark Twain's, would be unapologetically lowbrow. Part of each writer's appeal is that he pokes holes in the pseudo-sophistications of supposedly more serious approaches. In a 1982 lecture, Fate's Worse Than Death, Vonnegut noted that the self-consciously highbrow New Yorker magazine had never published his work. Indeed, he wrote his short stories of the 1950s for the immensely more general readership of Collier's and the Saturday Evening Post. These stories, collected in 1968 as Welcome to the Monkey House, deflate the pretensions of wealth, expertise, and influence with demonstrations of middle-class values and common sense. At the same time, Vonnegut was writing novels in formats borrowed from popular subgenres. Science fiction dystopia for Player Piano, 1952. Space opera for The Sirens of Titan, 1959. Spy thriller for Mother Night, 1961. Scientific apocalypse and intrigue for Cat's Cradle, 1963. and Prince and the Pauper Critique of Riches for God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater, 1965. Each work challenges the technical and thematic conventions of the novel, yet each time within the familiarity of a popular form. In the middle 1960s, with his family magazine markets having gone out of business, Vonnegut began writing essays for popular magazines such as Esquire, McCall's, and the Ladies' Home Journal. Reviewing the Random House Dictionary for the New York Times Book Review, October 30, 1966, he contrasted the assignment's linguistic complexity with his own shuffling hands-in-pockets approach. As lexicographers debated theories like prescriptive versus descriptive standards of language, Vonnegut could just shrug and say that the former, as nearly as I could tell, was like an honest cop, while descriptive was like a boozed-up war buddy from Mobile, Alabama. In other essays, the author's similarly self-effacing humor undermined positions that used intellectual pretensions to support their points. To the over-enthusiasts for science fiction who try to include writers like Leo Tolstoy and Franz Kafka in their brotherhood, he objects that it is as though I were to claim everybody of note belonged fundamentally to Delta Upsilon, my own lodge, incidentally, whether he knew it or not. Kafka would have made a desperately unhappy DU with the success of Slaughterhouse-Five and the widespread appreciation of his essays and personal appearances. Kurt Vonnegut became much more publicly outspoken about major issues. From his new home in New York City, where he moved in 1970 following nearly 2 decades of writing in obscurity on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, the author wrote novels such as Galapagos, 1985, Hocus Pocus, 1990, and Timequake, 1997, works treating such topics as the evolution and possible devolution of humankind and America's economic and social role at the end of the 20th century. Vonnegut's challenges to the conventions of traditional fiction make him as innovative as any of the literary disruptionists of the postmodern era. Yet he trusts in the honesty of plain and accurate statement. His last book was a series of socio-political essays collected as A Man Without a Country, 2005. 2 years before his death, the author found himself once more embraced by a new young audience, seeking an explanation for their era's woes. Hence his advice in How to Write with Style from his 1981 collection, Palm Sunday. I myself find that I trust my writing most, and others seem to trust it most, when I sound like a person from Indianapolis, which I am. Now, I hope that this video was useful for you. Subscribe for more literary content. Tell us in the comments if you have read any of Kurt Vonnegut's novels recently. See you soon! All the information is taken from the Norton Anthology of American Literature.